tomorrow tariffs 25% on Canada and 25% on Mexico, and that'll start. So they're going to have a tariff. So what they have to do is build their car plants, frankly, and other things in the United States.
The United States launched a trade war against Canada, their closest partner and ally, their closest friend. At the same time, they're talking about working positively with Russia, appeasing Vladimir Putin, a lying, murderous dictator. Make that make sense.
So that's how the week started. This is how it's going.
It's just a little bit of a 1-month reprieve. It's just a modification, short term.
They decided to proceed this week. They've made a change again today.
What a mess. The only thing certain on these 30 days is uncertainty.
It's not true that we will go through this psychodrama every 30 days.
Your Foreign Affairs Minister yesterday called all of this a psychodrama. How do you characterize it?
Thursday.
Well, and now it's Friday, so the tariffs were on. Now some of them are off, but only for a month, at which point President Trump says he'll throw them back on unless he does it sooner or just doesn't do it at all. The uncertainty, the constant threat of economic harm, it's united the country, and it even has Jagmeet Singh and Pierre Poilievre kind of saying the same thing.
My message to the president is this: knock it off. Stop the chaos. You are hurting your workers, your consumers, and most immediately, destroying trillions of dollars of wealth on your own stock market.
We've got Donald Trump acting like a toddler, smashing his toys, and instead of toys, it's our economy, it's our workers, and it's our workers' lives. You picked the rough fight with the wrong country. We're ready to fight back. You might have started this fight. We're going to finish this fight.
Okay, it's time now to check the pulse at the end of a topsy-turvy week in politics. Greg McEachern is a former Liberal ministerial staffer. Fred Delory is a former Conservative campaign manager. And here with me is Melanie Richer, a former communications director of the NDP. I don't know why I said here with me, because everybody's here with me. But it's that kind of week. I feel like I need a drink and a nap. Greg, where do you think this is? Justin Trudeau's last week on the job. He's not putting his feet up, taking long lunches, and going for an early drink. He is grinding it right to the end because of what's happening with the president.
I was taught a human resources trick once, where if someone works for you, back in my corporate PR days, if someone works for you and they give you notice, you chat with them about, if it's a 3-week notice, the next 3 weeks are your most important, because that's how you're going to be remembered here. You might need a reference, you might boomerang and come back. I think once the Prime Minister did his announcement, everything he's done has been pretty exemplary. And I hear this from really random places, people that you don't think are paying attention to politics. So I think that's good. I've said before, the fact that a lot of his cabinet ministers who probably could have made a pretty strong run for leader instead chose to work on the U.S.-Canada file. And I'm sure they're working some pretty late hours. And they are, what did we say a couple of weeks ago? Untethered. They're working hard and they actually sound like human beings. They talk, they answer questions, they talk like human beings. So I think there's been a good aspect to this. I'm happy that the Prime Minister is leaving and he can leave and say, I've done my level best on this. And so I think, going into this weekend, there's going to be, I think, some looking back on his time as Prime Minister, the good, the bad, the ugly. But I think he's leaving in a way that is as somebody who really likes the guy, I'm very happy for him.
Yeah, and look, we do want to talk more about Justin Trudeau specifically in just a little bit, but Mel, the work of the government, as the Prime Minister, Dominic LeBlanc burning up the minutes with Howard Lutnick, Doug Ford, I'm doing this to your electricity. I don't care. There is a real, go to the mattresses type of vibe happening here.
And we were talking last week, how do you appease somebody who's not looking to be appeased? I think we're seeing that in the reaction from the federal government, from Doug Ford saying, well, listen, if the only thing you're listening to is the market's not working and pressure back, bring it. we've got all of Canadians telling us to go ahead and do this. So I think that that's what we're seeing this week, the untethered, I think, from ministers and the Prime Minister. Obviously, this is somebody who has a bit of an ego, so does that backfire for us eventually?
You mean Trump has a bit of an ego? Yes, just making sure.
Yes, Donald Trump. So obviously, we've seen before that he doesn't like when, things are said about him. Does that eventually backfire us in a little bit? Too soon to tell, I guess. We'll see. But I think we've talked about this before. The only thing you can do at this point is push back. If there is no goal other than decimate our economy, well, you kind of gotta fight back. So I think that's what we're seeing from the federal government, and we're seeing it obviously from in the province as well.
Fred, it's interesting for a government that it was seen to be in a very weak political position because of just where they are in their leadership cycle and where they were in public opinion versus where they are now. There has been a focus and an urgency and an effectiveness in the way they've dealt with this in concert with industry and with the premiers. You know what I mean? Despite all of those underlying political challenges they will have to deal with in the election.
Yeah, it's interesting that they've been asleep for years, and then as soon as the Trump threat comes to bear, maybe you could say they met the moment.
Fire alarms do wake you up.
Yeah, and here they are. But it's interesting watching this whole week and this whole last number of weeks since Trump became president in terms of, he doesn't have a plan here. He doesn't have, he just wakes up with things he seems to want to do. Tariff on this, tariff on that. Next day he pulls them back. And I don't think it's set in yet with key Republicans, the damage he's doing to the Republican brand in the U.S. eventually, and the economy there, as how things are going to get so rocky. I think Canada, the way we're looking at it, we're united. I think nationalism, we're seeing it rise. Quebec, we're seeing Quebec nationalism disappear in place of Canadian nationalism. And I think it's great to bring our country together. And I think if we can diversify our markets, I think it's going to be ultimately this whole war, when this is over in 4 years' time, hopefully it's over sooner, Canada could come out much stronger than going into it.
It's remarkable, though, Greg, as we're having active conversations when I have politicians here and decision makers like, are we doing enough to hurt the Americans? It is bizarre to be in that sort of a circumstance. But, even like hauling the liquor off the shelves, which seems kind of a symbolic thing, then you realize a lot of that is on consignment. So those producers don't get a dime, and that stuff won't move until this is over. And you look at the stock market in the U.S., where Meredith on our team was looking at the Standard & Poor's Index. It's lost $3 trillion dollars in value in the Trump presidency. I mean, that's 4 trillion Canadian, 9 years of the federal government's operations. Just gone. You wonder how much is going to have to happen before it takes hold down there with him.
Yeah, and I've been watching, when Trump has been doing a press conference live and American networks, Canadian networks covering it, and then I check to see if American networks are covering it, because there's a lot of other stuff that he's doing that may seem to the average individual in the United States as this is more of a priority. But I've seen this week a lot of attention on this. The senior correspondent for NBC has tweeted about this. David Axelrod, former advisor to Obama and CNN commentator, has a tweet today where he's shared the Liberal video comparing Poilievre to Trump and saying how, this is basically woken up politics in Canada. The Conservatives were sailing to a victory, and now it's going to be a competitive election. So the Americans are paying attention. You mentioned the stock market. Alex Panetta from CBC has a great article this week about this is the place where Trump really cares about. But there is another
scoreboard, right? And he's losing.
But there is another place too, and that's his approval rating.
Yeah.
And in New York Magazine, you can find the Reuters, it's not Ecos, it's Ipsos poll, and Trump's approval rating is now down below 50%. And he stayed, on average, in his first term around 41%. So he's below 50%. The Americans that think the country's heading in the wrong direction is high 40s. So he cares about what he's liked about, how he's liked, what he's thought of. And the other thing I'm thinking of, this is a guy who comes out of reality TV, and I'm watching these clips of the Oval Office, and he's got this massive signature. Somebody's talked to him, and it's the same thing day after day. And even the people who like him eventually are going to be tired of that because it's the same, and it's only going to go so far. And then quickly, David, the New York Times is reporting about a really messy cabinet meeting where Marco Rubio is very upset with Elon Musk. That's where, sometimes the rot from the inside is more important than the people that are angry from the outside.
Yeah, Rubio is the most mainstream of them all, and he's increasingly going to be a fish out of water if the Musk view is ascendant. But, it's interesting, Mel, like, Tuesday was this week, when the Prime Minister gave his speech, and it was carried live on Fox and MSNBC and CNN. You're seeing at the White House press briefings, this is a consistent question, if not the lead question sometimes. And it was interesting that when the Canadian officials at every level were down in Washington talking to Democrats, they were criticized by some people saying, why are you talking to Democrats? They've got no influence. They're on the networks telling the Canadian story right now, right? Absolutely. So you have evangelists working for you. So you're seeing some of that start to pay off now as rank-and-file Americans are realizing this ain't going to be good for me.
Totally. You're seeing that. And I think you're seeing the thirst for some of those voices too. I think we've seen, Canadians even from all parties go on the American shows and say that story too, because folks are paying attention. They're seeing how it's going to impact their pocketbook, particularly the stories that folks are already paying attention to as it relates to, cost of living or whatnot. I think folks are not paying attention, but they're just following it a little closer. It seemed like, this doesn't affect me. This is like a thing over there. I don't know what these Canadians are talking about, but the way that our supply chains and the way that our businesses are linked, people are paying attention. People that you wouldn't assume are paying attention. So I think that also starts moving the needle a little bit. And it's not just us saying something. It's them saying, hold on a sec here. If this actually goes ahead, we are actually the ones paying for this. We saw a story today about how Canadian businesses were saying, well, you know what, our contracts are with American companies, and in our contracts it says if we get duties from the States, they actually have to pay them. So if those American companies are having to pay the duties that Canadian companies are being asked to, those are folks that can go directly to the president and say, hey, the hurt you're doing is actually I'm on the hook for it. So you're seeing that balance shift a little bit, and I think obviously it's hopefully helpful for us.
Yeah, I saw a Fox News interview where the reporter was talking to a guy who owns a car dealership, I think in Pennsylvania. He sells Dodge Rams, and he's like, my $80,000 trucks are now $100,000. They're going to sit there, no one's going to buy it. You're hurting us, you're killing us. Fred, I wonder, we have seen obviously cabinet ministers all over U.S. media. We've seen candidates all over U.S. media, premiers. We've seen Jagmeet Singh on CNN. Has anybody seen a conservative outside of a provincial conservative like Daniel Smith or Doug Ford on American media? And if not, why do we think that is?
Maybe they believe in Canadian media and they want to be doing...
Yes, that is definitely it. Coming up in our next hour, all of them. History. That was a really good attempt.
I said maybe.
Melissa Landsman, Michelle Rempel, they've all done Fox News.
I'm serious. I wonder about this, right? Like we've seen mayors, going down. Like, what's going on here with the opposition? I'm not holding you accountable for it, so don't. I just wonder if you have any insight on it.
No, I think look, the leader of the Federal Conservative Party, Mr. Poilievre, his format mostly for media is press conferences, which he does regularly. Did one today, and that's to Canadian media is who he does it for. That's who's watching. That's who he's trying to talk to. I see value, when Premier Ford is down there and he's working his relationships, like the governor of Kentucky, who is obviously a huge proponent of bourbon, which Ontario is the #1 customer in the world.
He's a Democrat, though, right? Zandy Bashir, I think is his name. He was on the short list for the Democratic vice president. So, he's a friend. He's an ally to Canada.
Republican Senator Mitchell, though.
Yeah, Mitch McConnell.
He is Mitch McConnell, sorry, is also affected by this and pushing for this. So there is going out there and getting those people involved, and that's why we're seeing folks like Premier Ford do it. But for Poilievre, he has his audience and he's speaking to it.
Okay, quickly, why do you think there's no conservative federally going into the U.S. market to make the case?
I go back to the Angus Reid poll that said that there's about 44% of self-identified conservatives were also supporters of Trump. I think this is their inability to pivot. They're getting there. But today, Poilievre said his message to the president was knock it off. I mean, if Justin Trudeau said that, conservatives would have been all over him. The NDP leader, gave him much more a better analogy, comparing him to a child and breaking toys. That was not strong today, and it was actually the press conference was not about Trump and tariffs.
Yeah, we're going to get that. So just Mel, quickly, what do you make of the absence of the Conservatives in the get on the U.S. airways?
Yeah, I think it's a inability to pivot or not knowing how to pivot because of fractions within the Conservatives who may not totally agree with them on everything. I think I texted the group yesterday that I was in a cab and the radio was carbon tax, Carney. It's all still about the carbon tax, which in this time I think is maybe a mistake in meeting the mood of folks.